Today we're going to be talking a little bit about investment in games. And we're going to do just a very informal kind of Q&A. So if you have any questions, please feel free to submit them via the app. I'll go ahead and introduce our panelists. On the far side, we have Lucy. Lucy is the studio and creative director of Starcult, an independent game studio in Wellington. Outside of the studio day to day, her main roles are within UI and UX design, game design and narrative, especially in terms of how to evoke feeling and empathy through games as an art form. Next to her is Tim Ponting, who is a 32-year veteran of the international games industry. Tim was the European Communications Director for Activision and founder of Renegade PR. He provides business development advice and angel investment to interactive businesses across New Zealand. He is currently the Establishment Director of the Center for Digital Excellence in Dunedin, a $10 million PGF-funded initiative to grow the games industry in the region. Then we have Chris Jagger, who is the founder and managing director of Alt Ventures, a VC firm that invests in seed stage startups. Chris spent most of his career offshore in Europe, the US, and Australia, before returning to New Zealand, where he headed up private equity investing at the New Zealand Super Fund. Alt Ventures is currently investing its second fund and has backed founders in industries ranging from cybersecurity and artificial intelligence to rocket propulsion systems and media content management. Chris is also an active angel investor in the US. And finally, we have Rob, who is the founder and managing partner at Hellfire Ventures, Venture Capital, and an entrepreneur turned VC who has been investing at the frontiers of machine learning, aerospace, media, and natural language processing since 2012. A committed gamer since 1991, Rob is a proud global ambassador for BAFTA Games and was most recently a judge of Britain's Best Game category, which I have questions about later. All right, so I thought I would just kind of start us off just doing kind of a brief overview. I'd like to hand it over to Tim. Tim, to put everyone in the room kind of on the same footing, could you give us kind of a very brief, very high-level overview of the investment landscape for games in New Zealand?
For sure. So there are probably four main categories of investment activity here. So running through them in no particular order, obviously grants are one avenue, so things like Kiwi Game Starter, the IDF fund from the Film Commission, Hey Hey funding from New Zealand On Air, and if you're lucky enough to live in Dunedin or want to work in Dunedin, then there's the Centre of Digital Excellence and our grant funding schemes. The next category really is publishers. So there are no major publishers in New Zealand, so this means going overseas to raise money from publishing companies. There are many that specialise in smaller games, and of course many publishers who invest in much larger games. Kickstarter still exists, so crowdfunding, but it's much more for video games now a marketing tool rather than a fundraising tool. And then another category would be angel investors, or increasingly now perhaps angel groups. So I've been investing in the industry here for around 3 years, I guess now. So those are typically relatively small investments in startups, quite high risk, and it's really from my position of having been in the industry for a long time that I can undertake that as a solo angel investor. And then there are the larger, kind of more established capital raising categories, such as VC funds and other kind of private equity funds. Increasingly, these funds are changing their behaviours. The world changes at an incredibly rapid rate, and a lot of the money is also changing the patterns in which it's being invested. So probably these people are better to talk on that subject.
Awesome. Thank you. Kind of that leads perfectly into talking to you, Rob, and you, Chris. Kind of, you guys are, I think, at least in my experience, very much kind of leading this investment into games. What drew you to interactive media? What makes you and your firms want to look at games as a potential opportunity?
Go first, if you like. Yeah. I suppose, I'm the founder and managing partner of my own firm, so I kind of invest in things that I like and enjoy and really enjoy games. I learned my trade in Los Angeles, so I spent a lot of time on the other side of the entertainment coin, so learning and spending a lot of time with content creators, so I've kind of picked up a fair amount of skill from that. I also just see that here in New Zealand, there's just really nobody doing this. And as an entrepreneur, which we are, as much as we are investors, right? I don't look like an investor, right? We are looking for new opportunities, and we see that the gaming sector is completely underfunded, almost not funded by VCs. So it's a natural opportunity for us to do that and to do something that combine what I love doing as well as with what I like doing as a job too.
Yeah, I'd echo that and also add that it's a genuinely, what are investors looking for? We manage money on behalf of other people, and those investors give us money to be stewards, and we're trying to generate returns, and we're playing at the risky end of the market, so we're looking for outsized returns to compensate for the risk that we're taking on for those investors. And those outsized returns come from global opportunities, and this is the genuine definition of a global opportunity, right? Nothing that is created in the gaming industry in New Zealand is intended for the New Zealand market. They may play in the New Zealand market, there may be players here, but it's all globally focused, and just this conference is evidence of the success the industry is having, generating this sort of globally relevant and attractive content. Now it's a crowded market, right? The market's exploded. COVID's only accelerated things. So it is a crowded space and it's hit driven. So that creates some challenges for venture investors. We typically rifle shot into investments, but try to build a portfolio for our funds. Any hit driven investment strategy's got to have a portfolio around it. So it's hard to do rifle shots into games like it's hard to do rifle shots into SaaS companies. So you need to build a portfolio around it. I think we're probably right time.
Excellent. And I think, when you're looking at building that portfolio, you mentioned COVID. I think that there are a lot of new game studios who are, maybe they weren't in the past ready to start looking into raising capital, and now they're starting to ask a lot of questions and starting to explore those opportunities. And one thing we hear a lot is this idea of, I want to see something that is investment ready. What does that mean to you? When you tell someone you want to see an investment ready pitch, what does that mean?
I suppose I had two studios pitch me yesterday. One was investment ready and the other one wasn't. The one that was acknowledged the fact that we're investing in the founder and the person and the studio. So we're not investing into individual titles. As much as we'd love to do that, we're really funding Hello Games. We're not funding No Man's Sky. So coming to a pitch with that vision and talking, much like in the film business, right? Coming to talking, showing me a slate of films. I want to see what else you're working on. I want to see all the different, your long-term vision for the titles that you want to create in 5 and 10 years' time. So coming with that, with a clear vision on that, with a good idea on how you're going to execute, who you're going to hire, who your target audience is, how you're going to drive, you're going to drive activations, and then how you're going to drive downloads on Steam or however else you're trying to monetize. Thinking about a publisher strategy, all those kind of stuff. It's got to be beyond just the creative vision, and that's when you're investor ready, in my mind.
Yeah, absolutely right. So to me, it boils down to why this, why them, why now, right? So why this? Why is this unique, different? Why can it win in a crowded marketplace? Why them? What's the team look like? Do they have the capabilities to execute? And why now? What is the plan? What's the strategy to go forward? Why is this the right time to sort of bring that to market? And how do you maximize the chance of success? And look, as Tim pointed out, there's alternative funding models, right? So venture money is not cheap. It's equity in the company, right? So it's a marriage. You're in there for 10 years plus probably. So you got to get the fit right as well with the investors, just like you would with a publisher on a publishing deal, which is more sort of, cash up front, repay it, revenue share at the back end. But it's relationship driven. So you need to be prepared. You need to understand what you're getting into. You need to make sure there's a good fit with the investor. Maybe it's a syndicate of investors that you're working with, and have a plan for how that relationship evolves over time. Are you going to need to go back to the well and raise more money over time? Having either the right investor that can keep following through, or the investor that can bring network relationships to bring more money to the table over time, depending on what the strategy is.
Yeah, that's actually a perfect segue, because my next question was going to be kind of what What are the funding opportunities out there, and what kind of deals can people expect? Like, Tim, if you wouldn't mind speaking to what are the different terms of different publishing deals, and how is that different from, working with a VC, for instance?
Yeah, so typically publishers are interested on a per product basis. So once they've built a long-term relationship, they might be interested in investing in equity, buying part of the studio, but typically they want to see your product. The key thing with publishers is to, and in fact with all forms of investment, is to look at things like timing. So going to speak to them at the right time is vital. I've made that mistake on many occasions. So publishers like to get their hands on things reasonably early so that they can handle things like announcement and marketing, and so that they can actually invest enough money in it to make it worth their while. But equally, they don't want to be too early, because if they're right at the top, they haven't really got anything to look at to assess the risk. So with publishers, it's an interesting kind of game of working out timings. In terms of the kind of deals that are available, it's always a negotiation, so publishers will never give you their best offer first, always be aware of that. And although they're looking to invest in products, they are much more interested, just like someone who's interested in equity, they're much more interested in the team than they are the product. You can fix products, but it's really hard to fix a poor team with poor leadership. So that's what they're looking for. The other thing that's very important to understand about publishers is that very often they want to give you more money than you need, and it feels counterintuitive. Why do they want to give me more? And the answer is, the more money they give you, the more percentage they can justify taking off you further down the line. So the better you are at what you do, the more money they want to give you so they can justify taking it off you at the back end. So understanding what their mindset is, understanding their terms of reference, what they're looking for both on the short term and the long term really helps. So anyone who's not done a publishing deal before, I really, really advise you to talk to your peers. So talk to anyone you know in the industry who has done a publishing deal and has been through 2 or 3 negotiations, because a lot of it actually is quite counterintuitive in the way that it works. And it's beset with difficulties, is it not? Yeah.
That actually leads perfectly, because I was going to say, Lucy, you guys actually have a kind of atypical investment deal, right? Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So as Tim was saying, often publishers are interested in per product deals, and for a long time this has been the standard way that publishers have been investing in games. But what we're seeing happen more often at the moment is that publishers are looking to acquire studios and looking more long-term instead. Back when I started up my company in 2018, this was still kind of unusual to have a publisher looking to acquire a company rather than an individual project. And we are technically acquired by our publisher, so they pay our overhead, and we have creative jurisdiction over all our products. And that is, I understand, not for everybody, but depending on what your goals are and what you're here to do in games, it was a really appealing arrangement for me and for what I wanted to achieve. So we are seeing more people like My Publisher Alliance and Amplifier Game Invest, who have been doing a lot of studio investments, especially in Europe. And I think that as the industry becomes more legitimate, people will be looking to invest more longer term, especially in studios with proven track records, rather than investing in single projects, because it just makes money. So,
absolutely. What would you say are some of your kind of biggest lessons learned in that process? Is there anything that you would say, definitely don't do X, or definitely do something?
That's a big question. So again, echoing Tim's font of knowledge, get a good lawyer and negotiate. Don't just accept any terms that are given to you straight away. I think I spent a year negotiating our contract, and like they're negotiating with you because they want to invest in you. So make sure that you go through the contract, pick it over with a tooth and comb, like make sure that you're getting what you want out of it, and fight for what you're worth. And it'll be a mutually beneficial agreement for you both to go into. And yeah, I also agree with the timing, like especially if you're going into an agreement looking for a publisher, especially that has like console connections. They will want it to be at the right time so they can kind of negotiate console deals with certain platforms, and that is very attractive to publishers. So yeah, definitely like being a good time to reveal what you're working on and showing that to them.
Excellent. And Tim, what would you say, I mean, as both somebody who makes games and somebody who invests in games, what are some things, maybe common missteps that you see in people who are working on their first pitch?
So common missteps, I think, are particularly, I think, when you're making your first or your first game as a studio. So you may be quite an experienced practitioner and made lots of games as an employee, but this is your first studio. A common misstep is just focusing on the game and the creative side in your pitch. The most important thing is your game needs to be encapsulated in like a 30-second sentence that most of the people who you speak to go, I get it. Because anything that's really difficult to explain is something that is edging its way into the market rather than kind of battering its way in, which is typically what people are looking for from a debut product. So yes, being overly reliant on like your creativity can be a problem. You have to understand that you are marketing yourself and your studio. Even if you're selling just a product, they're buying into you and their belief in you, and your ability to summarize and your confidence around what it is that you're making isn't around proving to them that you know more about free-to-play mechanic X or whatever it is that is your point of difference. So it's a very different conversation than you have at a games meetup when you're talking to your fellow game designers. It's different things that they're looking for. The other thing that is absolutely essential is make sure you know what you want. This is the biggest mistake I have personally made. So you get to a point where suddenly the timing is, hey, we have this investable project, and people are like, we'd like to give you some money, and you're like, oh, yeah, that sounds really cool. And they're like, so what do you want and why? And you're like, so you need to think about it before you ever have a conversation with someone who is a source of funding. Why do you want money? If you can't answer that question, no one's ever going to give you any money. The other thing is understand what they want from the relationship. So, understanding that, equity investment and growth capital, they have very, very different kind of envelope for their investment than a publisher will have. But equally, different publishers will have a very different attitude towards indie development teams, depending on who they are, what they funded before, what their history is. So know what you want and know what they want.
Yeah, I mean, I think that speaks a lot to, we've been talking a little bit about how we as game developers what we bring to the table as a part of this conversation. So my next question is, Rob and Chris, what is it that, VCs and angels and other investors, what is it that they can bring to the table? We talk a lot about governance and, advice and things like that. Can you speak a little bit about that and how game developers can expect to work with these types of groups once the deal is done?
Yeah, sure. So governance and advice is like the water you drink. We should all give that to you, not when it's not wanted as well, right? So as a fund, we don't believe in hefty governance structures. We think that kind of constrains creativity. So the boards that we typically have on our startups are 3 people, and we like it to stay that way until the Series A. In terms of the things that we provide, I mean, the key part of us making a decision into investing in you is, can we help you grow? Because we're not dumb money, we're not passive capital. We tend to be really active, again, not to be annoying, but to be hopefully as useful as we can. So, we've got connections into talent, we've got connections into other developers, into other publishers, into IP holders, into the studios system, into Los Angeles, and into other follow-on funds for later on capital, because we don't want to be your fund forever. Our job is to invest at the seed stage, maybe into the Series A, and then we stop, and then we give you to a better fund who's better at doing Series A, preferably in the UK or in London or in the US. So, that's how we ultimately raise capital from other investors to go into our future funds, by showing all the stuff that we do on top of just finding you and giving you a check. So our job and your job as people raising money is to come to us with a set of questions, much like what Tim just said about how you're going to spend that money, which we call use of proceeds, which is everything, but also to come to us and saying, right, who can you make introductions to me on day 2 after you've given me a check? Who will you do, and will you sign up to that? And we actually published recently on our website a matrix that you can use to actually hold us accountable for that kind of stuff. So feel free to use it, and if ever we invest into you guys, just use it against me as well. So come with asks. Don't be frightened. Always ask for the money. Too many developers come to me and don't ever ask me for the money. Kind of why you're there. So just treat us like a friend and a partner as well as an investor.
Would you agree?
Yeah, it's mainly, what does it boil down to? Dollars and connectivity. That's effectively what you come to look for. That's generally what most VCs present. And certainly at the earlier stage, so I don't take any active board roles on any companies that I invest in, but I find expert non-executives that can make those companies move faster on their strategy. And it's very similar to what Rob said, those boards stay tight so they can make decisions quickly. We're minority investors, so it's not like you come in and control the company. So I'm writing 300 to 500 NZGDA checks. So they take normally thick single-digit percentage interests in companies at the stage that I'm investing in them. And then it's all about, connecting, for me, largely US and European VCs, where, relationships that, personally have, and in the gaming space. And then, there's a reasonable mind. I think, Rob's got great connections back there, and that's what you're looking for, right? And then, oftentimes, you syndicate opportunities with, a number of investors. It depends what the strategy is, what sort of game you're looking to build, how much capital you're going to need to not just get it to market, but then to provide fuel to hopefully make it succeed once it's launched.
I think that cap table thing is really important. Like you saying, I'm glad that you take a small amount like we do. Your cap table, the 100 units that you have of your business is everything. And if you're trying to raise in Silicon Valley and you're going down the VC pathway, so you're not going down the publisher pathway, which we recommend, if you don't have 70% of your ownership on the post of you raising your seed round, and bearing in mind in the US, there's a family and friends round, there's a pre-seed, and then there's a seed, and there's a Series A. So after 3 rounds of capital, if you don't have 70% ownership, we won't even talk to you, because you don't have enough skin in the game, and this business is hard, it goes on for a long time. If you don't have enough ownership, why do you keep doing this job? 90 hours a week, divorced twice, lost your hair, wear Assassin's Creed clothes.
You're really selling it.
But why do you do it? So having enough ownership for us is actually de-risking our investments. And when I came to New Zealand, that was one of the challenges we had, was that people who, took a lot of ownership, and it left founders with very little left. So for us, that's just super important. If you don't have that attitude, then we're not going to be a good partner for you.
So obviously, you can probably expect a lot of pitches coming your way after this. But for those
Please,
people,
that's why I'm here. Yeah.
obviously, all of us can come to you and say, hey, we want to talk about this. But, for maybe people watching this recording afterwards, or people who aren't here, how can people kind of engage with the investment community? What's the best way to kind of get in, start meeting people, start making those connections?
Just reach out to us. Our job is to meet you. We're paid to meet you. We don't have an ivory tower, because if we did, we wouldn't get very far, right? So reach out to us. Like LinkedIn is a bit cheeky, because it's kind of like, it's like a freebie. Like, try and get to us through a friend, or for a contact, or see us as a shared connection. We all have websites with pitches at I mean, we're literally giving you an email address to send a deck to. So just don't be frightened. Don't, you know, we're completely normal individual, well, sort of. Yeah, just reach out. No worries.
Yeah, I'd say we're all a bit odd.
Yeah.
That's the reality. We're all sort of, you know, introverts trying to be extroverted about stuff. But,
Yeah.
you know, things that we know a little bit about, probably more damaging to ourselves than anyone else. But yeah, it's absolutely, so I don't even have an office, right? I work in the cloud. So, you know, I enjoy going out and visiting studios or companies and having coffees and understanding and, you know, digging into businesses. And you need to, you know, you start a relationship, there's going to be multiple meetings, right? To try and get to know people and work out if there's a good fit. But definitely reach out, you know, email me, chris@oldventures.nz.
We do a Flesh and Blood tournament every month now. If any of you play Flesh and Blood, I like that. Come. We do open house. Come and have a free drink and a slice of pizza. I mean, yeah, that's our job, is to meet you. So yeah, and we are a bit odd. Yeah. Cool though. It's the right side of weird, isn't it?
That's right.
Yeah.
Rob also loves Pokemon Go, if there are any trainers in here. Tim, I was going to ask you, and this is to Tim, both Tim and Lucy, would you say that the you know, just come right knocking on the door, would you say that approach is the same for publishers? Can you just reach out to them on Twitter and say, hey, I have an idea, or is there maybe a better way of doing that? If you don't have anybody, right? If you're just, this is my first time and I'm looking for a publisher.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, I would say that at least a lot of the indie publishers, for example, Robot Teddy, and like Moonrise, and just they're very active on Twitter and like very willing to engage. They're very easy to get in touch with, and they all seem like a lot of them are from indie development backgrounds or game development backgrounds as well, so they're very invested in connecting with people. So I would say that they're probably more approachable now than they ever have been, which is great.
That's awesome.
For everyone looking for investment.
Yeah. And what kind of resources, when you were like putting together your first pitch, what kind of resources did you look out for? I mean, obviously, you know, once you have a deal, you need to talk to a lawyer, but what else is out there to help put your stuff together?
I cannot stress enough, again, what Tim said is like talk to your peers, get a mentor. If you haven't run a business before or made a pitch before, like get peers to help you, draw from the support of the community, because yeah, everyone here is pretty keen on helping each other succeed, which is the nice thing about ANZ. But yeah, like make sure that you understand the basics of putting together a pitch, writing a good budget, not asking for too little money as well, which I also think is a huge red flag. Whenever I see people wanting to build a game for like 20K, I'm like, how? And like even on like instant noodles, it's impossible. So yeah, like not undervaluing you. Running that budget past other people that run studios. The Studio Owners Network in New Zealand has been really supportive and helpful when I was a newbie starting out. So yeah, like if you're looking to get started, like talk to anyone that's running a studio, because they will be more than happy to help you, and no matter what stage of learning you're at.
That's a very important point about valuing your work. So very, very important. So a good example is I might make an investment as an angel to help the team get to a point where we jointly have a project that we can shop around publishers and try and raise proper money to get the full production completed. Okay, so I might put, let's say, 100,000 New Zealand dollars into something to get it to that point. But before then, there has been a huge amount of work which has been carried out. So the money that's gone in is not just the $100,000 from an angel investor or an angel fund. It's actually the 18 months that 3 people have spent getting to the point where I went, oh, yeah, I'm prepared to give you some money to help you not live off pot noodles or like lose your marriage because you're trying to keep a job down and make this game. So when you go to the publisher will look at it and go, so, right, so you had $100,000 and you need another $500,000 to finish it. So we're putting in, 5x, and you put in 1x. And at that point, you have to value everything that you put in there. So look at how much time you've spent. And it's amazing. All of a sudden you realize, actually, we've put $350,000 or $450,000 worth of sweat equity into this project. Not to mention the creativity and the IP that we've created, So Tim's little 100 grand in the corner is the least significant thing when you are in those negotiations. So be aware and value what you're putting in. The other thing I think that's very important is less is more. So particularly these days, now that pitches are more accessible, people tend to have a pitches at email address. Listen to what they ask for in the pitch. So if they say, we want a link to a video, if you haven't got a video, go and make a video, right? It's really straightforward. If they ask you to include your pitch deck on your pitch email, even though you don't want to, do it. Because if you don't, you're not actually showing the first sign of partnership, which is like, we're listening to you. And pitch emails need to be short and snappy. And if you're hoping to raise $500,000, put a lot of effort into it. Think about it, test it, run it, A/B test it with friends. It's like, which of these two emails is more compelling to you? And just really take that tiny little step very, very seriously. And I can tell you in my own experience, that's massively increased the success rate that I've had working with studios on pitches, is listening to what people want and making sure that pitches are really pithy and delivering what's being requested.
One question people asked me when I was curating this talk is, what is the difference between an angel, a VC, and a fund manager? That's open to anyone.
An angel's an individual. A fund manager is generally an entity that manages a fund, so a third-party money. So my investors are family offices, New Zealand family offices, and they don't want to do the investments themselves as angels, so they commit to a fund that will be invested over a period of time with the expectation that they will make a certain return profile that compensates them for the early stage risk.
And how does working with those different groups change? Do your expectations change?
Yeah, so I think the dollar quantum changes. So angels put in less, funds can put in more. They tend to be bigger. Then bigger funds obviously can put a lot in. The requirements on the companies, there are, everyone will require information, understanding of, how you're meeting milestones, and everyone will want to contribute. So angels, if you can get the nirvana is get someone early who's a really super angel in your space, super connected. If you can find those people, phenomenal, go for it, and they can take you on the journey, and hopefully you never have to come back and raise money. I mean, I would happily say, venture's the last money you should ask for. It's probably the most expensive. You really need to know that you're wanting to get in a relationship for 10 years with an investor and that they can add value that is going to compensate you for the equity you've given up in the business. Angels also take equity, typically. So, yeah, get to know the investors beforehand. Do your diligence. We do our diligence. You definitely have to do your diligence around the type of capital and the partners that you're going to sort of get into a relationship with.
Can you talk a little bit more about due diligence? For anyone who's never been in the investment community, what does that mean?
Basically it's understanding both the product side, the market side, the technical side of the business, the company team aspects, the plan. It's us doing our homework to make sure that we understand the risk and opportunity and that the plan is deliverable with the resources that can be brought to the table. And that the sort of tail risks can be managed. So, what are those tail risks? Well, product flops, that's the obvious one. Founders break up, want to do different things. That's one that people generally don't tend to think about when they're raising money, but you probably need to. What does that mean if someone's going to leave and they've got equity on the cap table? Is there a reverse vesting type arrangement? That means that if you then need to bring someone else in, you can reallocate that equity to them. These sort of things you want to think about. You probably want to think about regardless of taking money in. If you're co-founding businesses, how's that relationship going to evolve over time? Because circumstances change, right, for everyone. And then for your diligence, it's the stuff that Rob and I were chatting about earlier. It's, what do we bring to the table? What are those connections? What's the capital? What does that mean over time? What's the style of investment? How involved do people want to be? And yeah, what are the other options that you can weigh that up against?
For us, like, we're, in addition to the great things that Chris said, which is bang on, we are a founder-focused fund. You know, we believe we've done our job when our founders love us and tell everybody else that they love us. And so for us to get to that point and make sure that you love us, we want to make sure that we love you too. And the way we get there is that I want to understand your audacity of your vision. I'm not funding Me Too's, I'm not funding the Pokemon Go of this and the Hades of that. You know, I'm funding truly unique projects founded by people who have got a vision that goes well beyond what can be done today. Our job is to live 3 years in the future, right? So what am I going to be maniacally playing in 3 years' time, or maybe the sequel to that in 3 years' time? So we're looking at the audacity, we're looking at your roadmap. So what are you going to do next? How are you going to get there? What new technology are you going to rely upon? Are you going to be developing in Unreal 4 or Unreal 5 or Unity? Are you going for a mobile market? Are you going for PC? Are you going for console? You know, how are you going to get this out there through Game Pass or through, you know, go Steam or Epic? All these different questions. So we're looking at that. We're looking at like your X factor as well and why you're the most credible person to build this particular type of game. So have you done it before? What was it like? What's your experience in this space? And I suppose, you know, we're just looking for like people who we're going to enjoy working with for 10 years because it's a long time and we've got to trust each other and like each other. And sometimes like I've made investments after meeting somebody and then 10 days later writing them a check. That's really hard to build that trust. So we're looking to accelerate getting to know you. We're just about to give the granary a check, and we hate those guys. But I mean, you know, but no, we've got to know each other. We spent hours together, days probably, and so it's that trust level that we need to have in our due diligence, which is really hard to do, but very fun.
It's important on the other side as well, especially like if you're an indie looking for a publisher, to find other indie studios that have worked with that publisher and ask them how that relationship has gone with them as well. Like not all investment will be equal to you in the way that it works for you. So finding the right fit for you as an indie, working with a publisher is just as important as finding that funding, because if you can't work together, then like that's a fundamental breakdown from day one. So make sure that you do your due diligence and check out what other studios have found their experience to be as well.
I think also understanding the difference between most publishers, not all publishers, and VC. So I think Rob was very eloquent there about what the kind of things that he is looking for and what their fund is looking for. So things that break the mold, things that are highly original, things that can scale really well. It's a 10-year growth plan, right? You go to a publisher with your debut indie game, they're not looking at that moment for the 10-year relationship typically. And they are, the thing that I often find is they're terrified of indies with too much ambition. And it's really weird. So if you go to them and you say, this is what we're building, and one of the commonest responses that I've seen is publishers going, ooh, I think consumer expectations are going to be really high of something like that. Are you sure about that scope? And you're like, well, look, we built the prototype works, we found the fun, we've told you how many staff we think it's going to take. And they're still very risk averse about things which are very ambitious. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so happy that VCs and angel funds, rather than individual angel investors, are looking more closely at games, because I'm hoping that some of the ambitious New Zealand studios will be able to find people who match their ambition rather than try and kind of put it in a kettle and say, well, we'll see how this small game goes first, and then next time we might give you a bit more money for the sequel or for the next game. So just be careful about how you present your ambition. You can be as ambitious as you want, but just don't scare publishers away if that's the conversation that you're having. But for other conversations, that ambition is vital to really kind of sell, not just sell, but to actually have, to internalize that ambition and be able to express it.
I think No Man's Sky is the case study that you should all read. Because, like, if he didn't go on a Stephen Colbert show, it would have been fine. But he did. And he talked about the audacity of his vision, and the first generation of the product wasn't able to meet that. But just coming to us and pitching us a procedurally generated universe, like, where you can go on any planet and you can see procedurally generated aliens, like, where do I sign? It's that kind of thing is what I want to fund. Unfortunately, they over-promised and under-delivered, but now they've totally delivered 4 years later, right? It's an amazing game now, but it's that was the perfect game as a Hill Farrance fund, title. Hello Games is a perfect studio for us. So if any of you got ambitions to knock them out of the park, then hey.
Yeah.
And I'd say that there's lots of capital offshore looking for those visions, right? So if you can get something to market here with the right support, the market's moving really, really quickly. I mean, chatting to some gaming opportunities in the US, I mean, they're literally closing their early rounds and then immediately opening up their next rounds. Haven't even launched yet at high valuations. There's a lot of money chasing, and particularly those truly differentiated, ambitious propositions. So if you can get it right and improve the execution around it, then there's a genuine chance to get the capital behind. And New Zealand is definitely on the radar. Like, everyone knows this is a market because you guys have developed world-class product, and there's really big success stories that have come out of New Zealand that have done it the hard way. But they've broken the glass bubble that has raised the profile. And then, a number of you are contracting with world-class studios globally. So, the knowledge of the talent base is definitely here globally, as it is here.
Excellent. We're going to go to some questions from the app, and several of these relate kind of very much to this topic. The first is, what are you looking for when you're investing in a company, studio, or people in terms of returns and benchmarks? Is there an investment horizon in mind?
I'll tell you if you want. We want you to 10x our investment minimum. We do. I mean, we have to generate outsized returns in a portfolio, right? We have 20 companies. Unfortunately, half of those are destined to probably not make it. One in our fund will crush it, and that will generate about 50% of our returns, and the other 3 or 4 will do just fine and produce a moderate return. So we need, everyone to be able to build a $1 billion business, at least now. That's what we're kind of looking for from a return. We're looking from an exit within under 10 years, typically within 7 to 10 years. 8 is my sweet spot of a year. I just had an exit yesterday that was in 4 years, so it can be earlier, but it's about that kind of time frame. And so, it's a long-term thing, but we want. That's why we don't want to be investing in studios with little ideas. You've got to be massive for us to generate the big returns.
Yeah, so absolutely echo that. I think that's the way particularly the early stage market thinks. Power law in the portfolio, small number of winners deliver everything. That allows you to compensate for the misses that happen. Understand the maths around the investment. So the valuation multiples for mature studios, well known, published. There's Drake Partners out of the US sort of publish every year. Depending if you're PC, console, or if you're mobile, generally they're EBITDA driven because the businesses are profitable at maturity. But thinking on a revenue basis, you're at 2 to 4 times revenue type exit at maturity. A big chunk of that's an earn-out, so we know those metrics. They're tracked through time, so everyone just works it back, right? So if we on a believable conservative case of where the business can get to, here's what the valuation is going to be, here's the cash we think that's going to need to be invested over that period of time, work it back. To Rob's point, if you underwrite that at a 10x required return and there's potential for asymmetric upside if you really take off, that's going to be compensating in a portfolio for the misses. So that's generally the maths that most VC investors are going to go through. So if you understand that, then you know the price of your equity for the dollars that you're asking to build your plan. And then the test is really being realistic around how much it's going to cost to get to those milestones that prove out the value points.
But that leads really well into the next question, which has a lot of legs, so I think a lot of people are interested. It says, Rob or Chris, can you give an example of an investing experience that's been very positive for you? Your descriptions are feeling a bit abstract.
The first one, I think. Yeah.
So from a soup to nuts, from offshore, and it shows the power of scalable capital. So I was fortunate to work for the fund that built SoftLayer, which is IBM's cloud services platform now. We sort of backed a team to build the business from scratch, and it showed that the power of the right capital early and syndicating into the right partners early delivered a really big outcome at the back end. So that's ultimately what we're all looking for. And so sort of bringing that back to New Zealand context, that's traditionally been hard because the pools of capital haven't been here. But that's really changed. So the positive experience, so I backed a cloud business, Portainer, last year, and just to show the visibility of companies that are doing well and showing traction data points, we were closing the seed round when Bessemer Ventures from the US approached and said, look, we really like this company too, can we join in? And so we reshaped the round to let them in. They're sort of one of the top tier US value VCs. And then they led the A round a couple of months ago. So you're definitely seeing certainly the people in the gaming publishing and platform conversations I've had, they definitely know the space here. There's capital that wants to look at opportunities. In New Zealand, I think the publishers are they're hunting. They're proactively hunting here because they want content. Tencent's here for a reason. They want the content. They know it's good. So, I think that's, and look, I can throw up cases where we took complete wipeouts because, we misjudged the market or the product didn't find the fit that we thought it was going to get. And those tend to be in my experience, those have been the reasons mainly that failures have happened.
My favourite one was when I first started out in this career. My first fund was all my own money, apart from one, and I had to sell my house to get into venture capital. So I was pretty much penniless, and I had $200,000. So I created my first fund, and the first company I met was somebody who met me at the Los Angeles version of this. And she came up to me and she said, "So I'm building an AR tool right at the time when AR was just brand new, and this was 2016, and I was like, I'm all in. Let's do it. I'll give you 50 grand. That's all I had. So I gave her 50 grand. The app became very successful. They started to do some really cool things with 360 video without needing one of those janky Ricoh cameras. She did it straight with native camera on your phone. And anyway, 18 months later, they sold to Snapchat. And it was my first exit, and it basically allowed me to go back to my parents and tell them I didn't make a bad decision selling my house. And it enabled me to be where I am here today because it gave me a little bit of liquidity that helped me out. So it was the most important thing. One, it was an amazing female founder. Two, they really loved the exit that they had. And they're now, one of them's the head of product at Snap. And three, it allowed me to pull myself out of bankruptcy. So yeah, it was good.
All right, so we only have 3 minutes left, and so I thought that I would end it off with, I'm going to ask each one of you the same question, and that is, what do you guys think, the next generation of games, what is the thing that everyone's going to be looking for? Is it user-generated content? Is it the metaverse? What do you think? What is the thing that you think is the next big thing?
I'm going to say metaverse because I'm really excited to be in it.
I think it's here now, right? And I think Roblox is proving out the micro creator communities. I think that is huge. And what we're now seeing is, what were the bleeding edge tech innovations like crypto and creator economies are now the mainstream. One of the biggest players in gaming now is Andreessen Horowitz, and they're also the biggest player in crypto. And they're bringing really powerful dollars to work. So you wouldn't want to bet against that.
Social multiplayer.
Simulation games.
Awesome. Well, everyone, thank you guys so much. It's been a pleasure hearing your perspectives. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to continue to add them to the app, and I'll see if I can get these guys to maybe answer some via Twitter. Awesome. Thank you all so much.